So we're about to hear our first reading from Isaiah 42, the first 9 verses. This reading is the first of the 4 servant songs in Isaiah. It's not totally clear who the servant is that is being referred to in this reading. But I do want you to listen and make your own guess as to who that is. So let's now listen to Isaiah 42, 1 to 9.
Here is my servant whom I uphold, my chosen one in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will bring justice to the nations. He will not shout or cry out, or raise his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smouldering wick he will not snuff out. In faithfulness he will bring forth justice. He will not falter or be discouraged till he establishes justice on earth. In his teachings the island will be put their hope. This is what God the Lord says, the creator of the heavens, who stretches them out, who spreads out the earth with all that springs from it, who gives breath to its people and life to those who walk on it. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. I will take hold of your hand. I will keep you and will make you to be a covenant for the people, a light for the Gentiles, to open the eyes that are blind, to free captives from prison, and to release from the dungeons those who sit in darkness. I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not yield my glory to another or my praise to idols. See, the former things have taken place, and new things I declare. Before they spring into being, I announce them to you. This is the word of the Lord.
And thanks to Ian. I'm glad this is entitled All Age Worship, All Age Talk, because I'm looking around, we're lacking a few of the younger members of our congregation. Still, this is still going to be a test for you, I think. Who do you think, when you read that first part of Isaiah 42, who do you think the servant is? Who is Isaiah referring to? I am sort of expecting some answers. I know it's early in the year, but Jesus. I'm glad Jesus was the first response, because actually that was my first response when I read that. Certainly the first few verses, I think, for a post-Christ reader, that's exactly who you might think it was. But actually, if you read further down, I don't think it's that clear. Does anybody else have any ideas? At this point, I'm sort of expecting Simon to Google it and then come back with the true answer. But see if I can get in before Simon does. Because in truth, I don't think anybody does know exactly who this servant was meant to be. Some people thought it could be the nation Israel. So Israel being the chosen people, and Isaiah referring to the whole nation. Remember, when Isaiah wrote this, Jesus hadn't been born. So the thought was it might be the nation Israel. The other thought was it might be Jacob, because Jacob, his subname was also Israel, Israel meaning the man who wrestled with God. And that's what Jacob did in that long story by the river Jabbok. at least one of the commentaries I read said that Isaiah was actually referring to the Persian king Cyrus. Now, Cyrus captured Babylon in 539 BC. Now, you remember that at that time, Babylon had overrun Israel and captured and exiled quite a lot of the Jews into Babylon. And when this Persian king captured Babylon, he then allowed the Jews that were exiled in Babylon to go back home. Not only did he allow them to go back home, he sent them home with a bag full of money to help them to repair the temple in Jerusalem. And if that wasn't enough, he sent them back with the treasures that Nebuchadnezzar had stolen from the temple. So you can see why Isaiah would have been quite favourable to this Persian king, Cyrus, because he gave them a big hand in re-establishing their system of praise and worship for their God. But the other thing I want you to just think about for a moment, once we don't have to assume that this reading refers only to Jesus, we can think a bit broader than that, can't we? So if you read this with the view that you are the servant, it actually transforms this reading somewhat. The first thing that Isaiah does, speaking to you, says, "Here is my servant whom I uphold, my chosen, in whom my soul delights." Isn't that lovely? Isn't that just precious for us? But then he goes on and tells us to look after the poor, to look after those who have suffered injustice, to look after the prisoners. And so it's a bit of a manifesto for us as Christ-loving people. So with that thought of a manifesto in our mind, we'll now listen to our gospel reading. This is from Matthew 3, 13 to 17. And it's the very famous reading where we hear of how John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin, have I missed something out? Oh, I've got the hymn coming after it in my reading. Angus, keep up, will you please? Having announced it and Leslie walked up, we'll continue with having the gospel reading. I should have checked the paper version. So this is the famous version of where Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist, baptizes Jesus. And this is, when we listen to the response that you get, the conversation between Jesus and John, this always reminds me of one of the other famous parts using water to cleanse the washing of the disciples' feet. So let's listen to Matthew 3.
It's Lord of the Dance, and then there was that one after it.
Oh, right.
The second reading is Matthew chapter 3, verses 13 to 17. Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to be baptized by John. But John tried to deter him, saying, "I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?" Jesus replied, "Let it be so now. It is proper for us to do this, to fulfill all righteousness." Then John consented. As soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water, And at that moment heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." This is the word of the Lord.